Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking about the 1995 Nightwing Limited series. Now this series was written by comic legend Denny O'Neil, and then drawn by Greg Land, and inked by Mike Sellers. And honestly, it's a really interesting story. It came out at an interesting time in the character's career, because honestly, Nightwing should have gotten a comic book series I'd say about 15 years before this, when he first started putting on the blue and yellow and light blue suit, because that would have just made it much more sense. He was much more popular as a character at that time, and he hadn't been taken down quite as far. And what I mean by that is, throughout the Teen Titans comics of the early 90s, Nightwing gets wrecked as a character. Like, really, his character is all but assassinated throughout those comics. Everything that could go wrong with his character does go wrong. And frankly, he's just put into a not great position as a character. And Chuck Dixon, the writer on one of the Batman titles around this time, had been doing some work to kind of help recover Nightwing's character, but to me it wasn't quite enough unless you were reading those Batman comics, which I haven't. So yeah, going from Marv Wolfman's last couple times writing the character where Nightwing is all but assassinated, going to this, it's just a hard line to sell. It's a hard mix of the character, and honestly, I was pretty happy. I'm okay with this story. It's not great. It's not a favorite, but I do appreciate. It's better the second time you read it, but honestly, it's not great. I'd maybe recommend it if you can find it cheap, or if you can find a trade paperback of it. But anyway, let's just hop into our story. Our story today begins with Nightwing rescuing a girl who has been kidnapped by a group of hoodlums. And as Nightwing takes down the kidnappers, we see that somebody is watching him. And after Nightwing takes down all the bad guys, we see that the person watching over him was Batman. And Nightwing is called Batman and asked him to talk. And as they go swinging through the city, Nightwing recounts his origins as Robin and his career as Nightwing. And he tells Batman that he's decided to retire from the superhero life. We then cut to the hospital, where we see Dick visit the girl who he rescued earlier, whose name is Miggy Webster, and the two plan to meet again the next day for a cup of coffee. But before they can meet up, Dick is visited by Alfred, who brings him a file on the death of the Graysons, Dick's parents. We see Dick read a threatening letter written by one of the clowns from the circus that they all worked for, dated just 4 days before the deaths, and from a time when the fictional circus was held in the country of Kravia. So Dick decides he's going to investigate, and we then cut to the Prince of Kravia, who, upon hearing that Dick is coming, is very excited for the opportunity to tie up the loose end that has been left open for the past 15 years. So he hires an assassin to kill Dick. We then cut back to the U.S., where we see that Dick's date with Miggy has gone very well, and after the two separate, we see the assassin come up to Dick. But Miggy steps in and offers to spend some more time with Dick, to walk him home, to clean up his place. But Dick is already on pretty high alert, so he just walks her back to her place instead of his. And after Dick drops her off, he takes a cab back home, but the assassin is waiting for him in his apartment. But Dick notices him, and the two begin to fight. And Dick is doing pretty solid, but the assassin just won't go down. But the assassin does make a break for it and hops on a motorcycle to drive away. Dick finds out that it was the Kravians who hired the assassin to kill him. Dick goes to the Batcave and he gets the breakdown on Kravia from Oracle, who tells Dick that the Prince of Kravia has ruled for about 15 years and that he is beginning an ethnic cleansing of the country. But Dick also believes that the Kravian situation may have something to do with his parents' murder. So Dick gets a new costume with some tech upgrades included and hops on a plane headed for Kravia. So Nightwing jumps out of the plane and he tries to glide in undetected on a parachute, but he's spotted. So he drops the chute early and he acrobats his way down through some trees, takes out the soldiers who spotted him, and he gets back to stealthing around until his phone rings because Miggy is calling him, asking for his help. But Nightwing is spotted and pinned down by the Kravians' flashlights. Nightwing is able to take down the soldiers, and on the phone he hears that someone is beating Miggy until the line goes dead. Nightwing continues to fight his way through the country until he's knocked out and brought to the palace. Nightwing is then dipped in honey and dropped into a pit filled with rats, but he runs into the Kravian Prime Minister in the pit, so Nightwing presses him for information about Haley's circus. And Nightwing also starts climbing his way out of the pit, dragging the Prime Minister with him. The Prime Minister then begins to explain that many years ago the Prince of Kravia was scarred and left as the ruler of the country at age 6. And as a ruler, he was brutal and he was a brutal, unjust, cruel leader. So a group of government officials decided to replace the prince with the Prime Minister's son. But they had to commit some pretty awful surgery on the Prime Minister's young child, and they had to kill the true prince. So the Prime Minister took the prince to the circus so that he could get him by himself, and the Prime Minister described himself as a clown before luring the prince into the big top and murdering him, a murder which was witnessed by the Graysons. So the Prime Minister threatened the Graysons into silence, explaining the letter that Nightwing found at the beginning of the story. The Prime Minister then explains that his son has become gradually more and more insane, but Nightwing pushes the Prime Minister for more info about the Graysons until they reach the top and bust out. But on the way out of the execution chamber, Nightwing is shot by a guard. But Nightwing's new threads are bulletproof. So when the guard wanders over to make sure to confirm the kill, Nightwing takes him down and Nightwing and the Prime Minister make a break for it. They make it out of the palace and they make it to an airstrip and they fly to the U.S. When they land, the PM is taken into the hospital and Nightwing goes to his apartment and Miggy is calling him, begging him for help because her dad is beating her and threatening to shoot her. But before Dick can run off to save the day, the assassin from the beginning of the story shows up and wants to fight Dick. And after a prolonged fight, Nightwing beats the assassin and steals his bike and goes off to save Miggy. But before he can get there, Miggy wrestles the gun from her father and shoots him. So when Dick gets there, he calls the cops and they all come and take away Miggy. Dick then visits the Prime Minister of Kravia and he gets the last piece of information that he wants. Did the Kravian government kill his parents? And no, they didn't. They were killed by the gangster Tony Zuko, as has been the belief held by everybody in the universe for the past several years. Then to end the story, we see Nightwing and Batman have another heart-to-heart conversation, and we see that Dick has decided to stay a hero. Alright, so that's the story. And honestly, man, it's a weird little story. I don't enjoy it. I don't like that, I don't like the whole international aspect of the story that is just completely unaddressed. In Kravia, there's an ethnic cleansing going on, and they just proceed to set up this really interesting, really big threat that Nightwing's gonna have to overcome. And then they just don't have him deal with it at all. He just leaves, he just runs it. There's no confrontation with the prince. There's nothing. He just gets out of the country and he runs. He leaves. Like, what the heck is that about? And then with his little girlfriend throughout the story, with Miggy, she's set up in the story to have like this perfect family, this perfect life, which, you know, whatever, you could kind of tell that something was up. But then you know, her father's beating her and she murders her father. And it's just a weird story for some of the elements like that. And we also see throughout the story that Nightwing is supposed to be this very skilled fighter, and I don't know. I don't know what it is about this story. Nightwing feels very weirdly good at fighting and then weirdly bad at fighting at the same time. That's a weird nitpicky complaint, but he feels inconsistent, and I just don't like it. I don't like one of my least favorite elements of the story is when they throughout the story when they throw into question that Tony Zuko murdered the Graysons, because that is such an ingrained part of Dick Grayson's origin story as Robin and as Nightwing that you just can't alter. That has been probably the biggest part of Nightwing's origin for the 50 years of Nightwing's existence before this story came out. It was always Tony Zuko, the gangster, killed Nightwing's parents because they didn't participate in a protection racket. So to throw that into question for this story, and to so cheaply do it too, I really don't like it. I don't like a lot of the writing tropes of this story. I don't like the story of this story. But I don't know. For some reason, the second time I read this, it felt a lot better. Something that I do actually like the way it's written is the whole thing about Miggy. I think that's actually written pretty well. I think it's set up very well, but not so well that you immediately see it coming. Like the first time I read it, I was a little weirded out. Like, why does she always want to just hang out with Dick at his place? You know, what's going on? Does she just like him that much? And then the second time I was reading it, I was like, oh shoot, she just don't want to go home. Ah, okay, I see what's going on now. Yeah, and it's just one of those things where I think that's actually a very well written element of this story. But I think it's just about the only well written element. I like that Batman was in the story without like really being a major part of the story. I like a lot of those elements. But overall, I would just recommend heading straight up to for Nightwing. I'd recommend reading Teen Titans, and then I'd recommend reading some of the later issues of the Nightwing series, of the Nightwing monthly series from the 90s. But really, overall, you can just completely skip this series right here, and you will be completely fine. It's not bad. It's just also not good, and it adds little to nothing to the character of Nightwing. So for all those reasons, I would say it's probably a pass. But honestly, that's really all I've got time for today. So I'm just another guy named James, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.